Princess Zarathiel stood on the crystal balcony of her tower, watching the 3 moons of Veltara rise above the purple mountains. Her silver skin shimmered in the moonlight, and her 4 arms moved gracefully as she adjusted the flowing robes that marked her royal status. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, she would marry a human. The thought still felt strange to her. Humans were such odd creatures, with their pale skin and strange 2-armed bodies. They were weak, peaceful beings from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. Her father, Emperor Kethvar, had chosen this alliance carefully. The humans had resources the Veltaran Empire needed, and they seemed harmless enough to trust with access to their trade routes. "My lady," came a voice behind her. Zara turned to see her personal guard, Commander Thexul, approaching with his usual serious expression. His blue-scaled face showed concern. "Your father wishes to see you before the ceremony tomorrow." Zara nodded and followed Thexul through the winding corridors of the palace. The walls were carved from living crystal that pulsed with soft light, and holographic displays showed scenes from across the empire. As they walked, she thought about her future husband. She had only met David Chen a few times during the negotiations. He was a diplomat from Earth, sent to arrange this marriage alliance. He seemed pleasant enough, with his dark hair and brown eyes, but he was so quiet. He spoke softly, smiled often, and never raised his voice. During their meetings, he would sit calmly while her father's advisors shouted and argued about trade agreements. He would nod politely and make reasonable suggestions in his gentle voice. Her younger sister Kira had laughed about it. "You're marrying someone who probably couldn't hurt a moonfly," she had said. "At least you won't have to worry about him trying to control you." The Emperor's throne room was vast, with a ceiling that opened to the stars above. Her father sat on his crystal throne, all 7 feet of his imposing form radiating authority. His golden eyes, a mark of the royal bloodline, fixed on Zara as she entered. "Daughter," he said in his deep voice, "tomorrow you begin a new chapter for our empire. Are you ready?" "Yes, father," Zara replied, though she felt nervous. "The human seems agreeable." Emperor Kethvar's expression softened slightly. "David Chen is an interesting choice by the humans. Their diplomatic corps is extensive, yet they sent someone so young and seemingly inexperienced. Perhaps they underestimate the importance of this alliance. Or perhaps they simply sent someone they could spare," Zara said. "He seems harmless enough." "Harmless can be good in a consort," the Emperor mused. "You will rule the new human territories we gain through this alliance. A quiet husband will not interfere with your duties." That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She wandered to her private study and activated her holographic database, calling up files on human culture. The information was limited. Humans were a young species, having only achieved space travel 300 years ago. They had no real military to speak of, at least nothing that could threaten an empire like theirs. Their weapons were primitive, their ships slow, their technology centuries behind Veltaran science. Most interesting were the notes on human biology. They were remarkably fragile compared to other species. No natural armor like the Veltarans, no enhanced strength like the Krexani, no telepathic abilities like the Mindari. Just soft, weak creatures who had somehow managed to spread to a few dozen worlds through sheer stubbornness. The next morning brought the wedding ceremony. The great hall was filled with dignitaries from across the empire. Zara wore the traditional golden robes of a Veltaran bride, while David stood waiting in a simple human suit. He looked so small next to the assembled aliens, but he stood straight and calm. As they spoke their vows, Zara studied his face. He had an interesting face, she decided. Not handsome by Veltaran standards. But there was something compelling about his dark eyes. They seemed to hold depths that didn't match his quiet demeanor. When he looked at her during the ceremony, she felt like he was seeing more than just her appearance. "Do you, Princess Zarathiel of House Veltara, accept this human as your bonded mate to share in the expansion of the Empire and the strengthening of both our peoples?" the priest intoned. "I do so accept," Zara replied formally. "Do you, David Chen of Earth, accept this princess as your bonded mate to serve alongside her in the growth of the alliance between our peoples?" David's voice was clear and steady. "I do so accept." The priest raised his crystal staff. "Then, by the power of the three moons and the blessing of the eternal stars, you are bonded. May your union bring prosperity to both your peoples." The reception that followed was a blur of congratulations, political discussions, and carefully prepared speeches. Zara noticed that David handled himself well among the alien dignitaries, despite being the only human present. He spoke when spoken to, asked thoughtful questions, and never seemed overwhelmed by the attention. During a quiet moment, her cousin Lord Vexitar approached her. "An interesting choice of husband, cousin," he said with his usual smirk. "Are you certain a human will be able to keep up with you?" "What do you mean?" Zara asked. "Well, you know how humans are. Peaceful farmers and merchants. Will he be able to handle it when you have to make the hard decisions that ruling requires? What happens when you need to deal with rebels or pirates in the human territories?" Zara glanced over at David, who was having what appeared to be a pleasant conversation with Admiral Gorthok about human music. "I suppose we'll manage," she said. That night, in their new shared quarters, Zara and David sat together on the terrace overlooking the city. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but Zara felt she should make an effort to know her new husband better. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" she asked. They would be traveling to the human sector to begin establishing joint administration of the new territories. David turned to look at her, and again she was struck by his eyes. In the moonlight, they seemed almost to glow. "A little," he admitted. "This is all new to me." "You handle yourself well for someone who's nervous," Zara observed. "My cousin was wondering if you'd be able to handle the more difficult aspects of ruling. There are sometimes problems with smugglers and raiders in the outer systems." David was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. "I imagine there are challenges in any position of authority," he said finally. "Though I hope most problems can be solved through negotiation rather than force." "And if they can't?" He turned back to her, and for just a moment, Zara thought she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Something that didn't match his gentle demeanor at all. But then he smiled his usual calm smile. "Then I suppose we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it," he said. The next morning, they boarded the Imperial transport ship that would take them to the human sector. The journey would take several days, giving them time to plan their administration of the new territories. Zara had brought along her personal staff, including Commander Thexel, and several advisors. As they traveled through hyperspace, Zara found herself studying David more carefully. He was always polite, always calm, but there were little things that didn't quite add up. The way he moved was too controlled, too precise for someone who was supposedly just a diplomat. When they discussed the territories they would govern, he asked very specific questions about security arrangements and military assets. "You seem to know a lot about military matters for a diplomat," she mentioned during one of their planning sessions. David shrugged. "Earth's diplomatic corps receives comprehensive training. We need to understand all aspects of the systems we work in." It was a reasonable answer, but something about the way he said it made Zara think there was more to it. She decided to do a little investigating. That night, while David was in meetings with the ship's captain about their arrival procedures, Zara accessed the ship's communication array and sent a priority message back to Veltara. She wanted more detailed information about her new husband. The response that came back was puzzling. David Chen's records showed he was indeed a diplomat, but his background before joining the diplomatic service was classified at levels that even her royal status couldn't access easily. For someone who was supposedly just a peaceful negotiator, he had remarkably restricted files. More interesting was a small note buried in the files. Subject recommended by Earth Defense Command for deep cover diplomatic positions. Earth Defense Command. Zara had never heard of such an organization. According to everything she knew, Earth had no real military structure. She was still puzzling over this when David returned to their quarters. He found her on the observation deck, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked, joining her at the window. "Just thinking about tomorrow," she said. "We'll be entering human space, your people's territory." "Nervous?" he asked, echoing her question from the night before. "Should I be?" she countered. David was quiet for a long moment. When he looked at her, that strange depth was back in his eyes. "Probably not," he said. "Though I suppose it depends on what you're nervous about." Before Zara could ask what he meant by that, Commander Thexel's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Princess, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the border stations. There's been an incident." They hurried to the bridge where Captain Morthek was studying tactical displays with a grim expression. "What's happened?" Zara demanded. "A convoy of Veltaran merchant ships was attacked near the Proxima system," the captain reported. 3 ships destroyed, 2 captured. The attackers appear to be Corvin raiders. Zara felt her blood go cold. The Corvin were notorious pirates who operated in the lawless regions between sectors. They were vicious fighters who showed no mercy to their captives. "How many ships in the convoy?" David asked quietly. 6 merchant vessels with minimal escort, Captain Morthek replied. The survivors managed to get a distress call through before the raiders disappeared into hyperspace. "We need to mount a rescue operation immediately," Zara said. "Those captured ships could have hundreds of crew members aboard." "With respect, Princess," Commander Thexel said, "our ship isn't equipped for military operations. We should contact the nearest naval base and request assistance." "That will take days," Zara protested. "By then, the raiders could be anywhere." "The Corvin have a base in the Tethys Nebula," David said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "If they're following their usual pattern, they'll take the captured ships there to strip them for valuable cargo before selling the crews into slavery." "How do you know about Corvin tactics?" Commander Thexel asked suspiciously. David met the commander's gaze steadily. "Like I said, diplomatic training is comprehensive." Zara studied her husband's face. There was something different about his expression now. The gentle diplomat persona seemed to have slipped, just a little. His eyes had grown cold and calculating. "Even if we knew where they were going," Captain Morthek said, "this ship has defensive weapons only. We couldn't engage a Corvin raiding fleet." "Maybe we don't need to engage them directly," David said. "What kind of ships do the Corvin typically use?" "Modified freighters and fast attack craft," the captain replied. "They rely on speed and surprise rather than heavy armor." David nodded, and Zara noticed his hands were perfectly steady as he moved to the tactical display. He studied the star charts with the focused intensity of someone accustomed to military planning. "If we approached from the nebula's outer edge, here," he pointed to a section of the display, "we could use the sensor interference to mask our approach. The key would be creating a distraction that draws their forces away from the captured ships." "What kind of distraction?" Zara asked, fascinated despite herself. David looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something dangerous flicker in those dark eyes. The kind that makes them think they're you. Captain Morthek stared at David with obvious confusion. "Sir, with respect, this is a diplomatic vessel. We have light defensive shields and basic weaponry. Creating the illusion of a major attack force would be impossible. David moved around the tactical display, his fingers dancing over the controls with surprising familiarity. Not impossible. Just requires thinking differently about what constitutes an attack force. Zara watched her husband with growing fascination. The quiet diplomat from the wedding ceremony was gone, replaced by someone who clearly understood military strategy. His movements were precise and confident as he called up technical specifications for their ship. The Corvin rely on sensor data to assess threats, David continued, highlighting sections of the display. Their ships are fast but lightly armored because they prefer to run from superior forces rather than fight. If we can convince them they're facing something overwhelming, they'll abandon their captured prizes and scatter. And how exactly do we do that? Commander Thexel asked, his tone skeptical. David's smile was sharp. We lie to their sensors. Over the next hour, David outlined a plan that made Zara's head spin with its complexity. Using the ship's sensor array and communications equipment, they could create false signatures that would appear on Corvin scanners as a large military fleet approaching through hyperspace. The trick was timing and positioning. The nebula will mask our actual signature, David explained, pulling up detailed charts of the Tethys Nebula's composition. But if we position ourselves correctly and broadcast on the right frequencies, we can make it look like a battle group is about to emerge from hyperspace at multiple points around their base. You want to fake an entire fleet? Captain Morthek said incredulously. Not fake, simulate. There's a difference. David's fingers moved over the controls, calling up technical specifications that Zara hadn't even known existed on their ship. Every ship has a unique hyperspace signature based on its engine configuration and mass. If we modulate our communications array properly, we can broadcast signatures that match Imperial Navy vessels. How do you know the Imperial Navy ship signatures? Commander Thexel demanded. David paused, glancing at Zara before answering. Earth's diplomatic corps maintains detailed files on all major military forces for security purposes. It was another reasonable answer that didn't quite feel complete. Zara filed away her questions for later. Captain Morthek studied the plan, his expression thoughtful. It's actually not impossible, but it would require precise timing and complete knowledge of Corvin scanning protocols. I can handle the protocols, David said simply. And if they don't fall for it? Zara asked. If they realize it's a deception? David's dark eyes met hers. Then we'll need to be ready with a backup plan. The way he said it made Zara think he already had something in mind. They spent the next several hours preparing. David worked with the ship's technical crew, making modifications to their sensor and communications arrays that seemed to come naturally to him. Zara noticed that the crew, who had initially been skeptical of taking orders from a human, quickly began deferring to his expertise. Where did you learn so much about starship systems? She asked during a brief break in the preparations. Earth's diplomatic academy is very thorough, David replied, but his attention was focused on the tactical display. We need to be ready for anything when we're operating in alien space. That evening, as they approached the nebula, Zara found herself studying David more intently than ever. He was in constant communication with the bridge crew, coordinating their approach with military precision. His calm demeanor remained, but there was an underlying intensity that reminded her of a predator preparing to strike. Princess, Commander Thexel approached her privately. I've been thinking about this plan. It requires knowledge of Corvin tactics, Imperial Navy signatures, and advanced sensor manipulation. That's not typical diplomatic training. What are you suggesting? Zara asked, though she had been having similar thoughts. I think your husband might not be exactly what he appears to be. Before Zara could respond, David's voice came over the ship's communication system. All stations, we're beginning our approach. Maintain communication silence until we reach position Alpha. The next few hours were tense. They navigated through the outer edges of the Tethys Nebula, using its swirling gases and electromagnetic interference to mask their approach. David coordinated their movement from the bridge, displaying an understanding of space navigation that went far beyond diplomatic training. Finally, they reached the position David had calculated. On the long-range sensors, they could make out the Corvin base, a collection of modified asteroids and makeshift stations clustered around what had once been a mining operation. Several ships were docked, including 2 that matched the signatures of the captured Veltaran vessels. There, David pointed to the display. The merchant ships are at docking bay 7. Minimal security around them, which means the Corvin haven't started processing them yet. How can you tell all that from sensor readings? Zara asked. David glanced at her, and for a moment she saw something flicker in his expression. Experience reading tactical displays, he said simply. Beginning the deception now, Captain Morthek announced. David took control of the communications array, his fingers moving with practiced skill across the complex controls. On the tactical display, false signatures began appearing at the edge of the nebula. To Corvin sensors, it would look like a massive Imperial Navy fleet was preparing to emerge from hyperspace. The effect was immediate. Alarms began sounding from the Corvin base as their sensors detected the apparent incoming fleet. Ships began undocking hastily, and frantic communications chatter filled the airwaves. It's working, Commander Thexel said with obvious amazement. They're abandoning their position. But David was frowning at the display. Something's wrong. They're not running. Zara looked at the tactical readout. Instead of scattering as predicted, the Corvin ships were forming up into a defensive formation. Why aren't they retreating? Because, a new voice said from behind them, they know the difference between real Imperial Navy signatures and fake ones. Everyone spun around to see 3 Corvin warriors standing in the bridge entrance. They had somehow boarded the ship without triggering any alarms. The largest of them, his scarred face marked with ritual tattoos, stepped forward. I am Vextor, raid leader of the Bloodfang clan, he growled in accented Galactic Standard. Your deception was clever, but my sensors operator spent 10 years in Imperial service before joining us. He knows what real Navy signatures look like. Captain Morthek reached for his sidearm. But the Corvin were faster. Energy weapons appeared in their hands, trained on the bridge crew. Now then, Vextor continued, you will surrender your ship, and we will add a Veltaran princess to our collection of prizes. Zara felt her heart sink. The plan had failed, and now they were all captives. She glanced at David, expecting to see defeat in his expression. Instead, she saw something that made her breath catch. David's eyes had gone completely cold, and he was standing perfectly still in a way that reminded her of a hunting cat about to pounce. You know, David said conversationally, you made one mistake. Vextor laughed harshly. What mistake would that be, human? You assumed I only had one plan. Before anyone could react, David moved. Zara had never seen anything like it. One moment he was standing calmly by the communications console, the next he was in motion with fluid grace that seemed impossible for his frame. His hand struck the nearest Corvin's wrist with surgical precision, sending the warrior's weapon flying. In the same motion, he spun and delivered an elbow strike to the second raider's throat. Both moves happened so fast that Zara barely saw them. The third Corvin, Vextor himself, managed to get his weapon up and fire. The energy blast should have struck David's center mass, but somehow he wasn't there anymore. He had twisted aside with inhuman speed and grace, the blast passing harmlessly through empty air. David's counterattack was devastating. He grabbed Vextor's weapon arm and twisted it with a sharp motion that produced an audible crack. The raid leader screamed and dropped his weapon. A moment later, He was on the deck, David's knee on his throat and his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that looked painful. The entire fight had lasted perhaps 3 seconds. "Commander Thexul," David said calmly, as if he hadn't just disabled 3 armed raiders with his bare hands. "Please secure these prisoners. Captain, I need you to contact the Corvin base." "Contact them?" Captain Morthek stammered. "Sir, how did you—" "We're going to negotiate," David said, applying just enough pressure to make Vextor grunt in pain. "I suspect they'll be more reasonable now." The communication with the Corvin base that followed was unlike anything Zara had ever witnessed. David, still holding the raid leader in a submission hold, spoke to the raiders with calm authority. "This is the diplomatic vessel Starlight's Edge," he said into the communicator. "I have your raid leader, Vextor, as my prisoner. I'm prepared to exchange him for the immediate release of the captured Veltarin vessels and their crews." The response was a stream of curses in the Corvin language. "I understand you're upset," David continued reasonably. "But consider your position. Your leader is my prisoner, and you know nothing about my capabilities. For all you know, I have a fleet in hyperspace ready to emerge on my command." "You're bluffing," came the snarled reply. "We detected only 1 ship." David's smile was cold. "Are you willing to bet your base on that assumption? Vextor made that mistake once already today." There was a long silence from the Corvin base. Finally, a different voice came on the channel. "What guarantee do we have that you'll return our leader?" "You have my word as a representative of Earth," David replied. "Release the prisoners and their ships, and I'll return Vextor unharmed." Another pause. "And if we refuse?" David's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Zara shiver. "Then I suppose you'll discover what happens when someone threatens my wife." The way he said it with quiet certainty was more terrifying than any threat of violence could have been. An hour later, they watched as the 2 Veltarin merchant ships undocked from the Corvin base, their crews safe and accounted for. David had been as good as his word, releasing the raid leader once the exchange was complete. As the Corvin ships disappeared into hyperspace, Captain Morthek turned to David with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Sir," he said carefully, "I've been in the Imperial Navy for 15 years. I've seen Special Forces soldiers, elite guards, and master warriors. I've never seen anyone move like you just did." David was back to his calm, diplomatic demeanor, but Zara could see the tension still coiled in his shoulders. "Earth's diplomatic corps faces unique challenges," he said. "We receive training appropriate to those challenges." "No diplomatic corps trains its people to fight like that," Commander Thexul said flatly. "Those were killing techniques, military combat skills." David met the commander's gaze steadily. "As I said, we face unique challenges." That night, alone in their quarters, Zara confronted her husband directly. "David, I need to know the truth. Who are you really?" He was quiet for a long moment, sitting on the edge of their bed and staring at his hands. When he looked up at her, his expression was serious. "I'm exactly who I said I am," he said. "A diplomat from Earth, assigned to strengthen relations between our peoples. Diplomats don't fight like you fought today. Earth diplomats do. Why?" David was quiet for so long that Zara thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but carrying an weight that made her listen carefully. "Because Earth is not what your people think it is," he said. "We're not the peaceful farmers and merchants your intelligence reports describe. We're survivors, Zara. We've been at war for 300 years. War with whom? Each other. Other species. Pirates. Hostile environments. Anyone and anything that threatened our existence." David's eyes met hers, and in their depths she saw something that made her understand why Vextor had surrendered so quickly. Earth's diplomatic corps isn't just trained in negotiation and protocol. We're trained to survive in hostile territory, to fight when we have to, and to protect the people we care about by any means necessary. Are you telling me that every human diplomat is a trained killer? David's smile was sad. I'm telling you that every human is a trained survivor. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and we learned that lesson very early. Zara sat down beside him, her mind racing. Then why do all our reports say humans are peaceful? Because, David said, reaching over to take her hand gently, peaceful and harmless are two very different things. We prefer peace, but we're prepared for war. As she looked into her husband's dark eyes, Zara realized that everything she thought she knew about humans was wrong. And tomorrow, they would enter human space, where she would discover just how wrong she had been, under attack by something much larger than one diplomatic transport, he said with a smile that wasn't gentle at all. The first sign that everything Zara thought she knew about humans was wrong came when they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory. "Defensive perimeter established," Captain Morthek announced, reading from his tactical display. "We're being scanned by the ancestors. How many ships are out there?" Zara moved to the display and felt her breath catch. What she had expected to find was a small patrol of lightly armed vessels. Maybe a few converted cargo ships serving as system defense. What she found instead was a military formation that would have impressed an Imperial admiral. Sleek warships hung in perfect formation around the hyperspace entry point. Their hulls were matte black, designed to absorb sensor scans, and they bristled with weapon systems that looked far more advanced than anything in the intelligence reports. "Welcome to human space," David said quietly, moving up behind her. "I should probably mention that first impressions can be deceiving." Before Zara could ask what he meant, a communication came through from the lead ship. The face that appeared on their screen made her take a step back. The human woman addressing them had scars across one cheek and eyes that held the same dangerous depth she had learned to recognize in David's gaze. "Transport Vessel Starlight's Edge. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the 5th Defense Fleet. Permission to come aboard?" "Admiral Chen," David stepped forward. "Hello, Sarah." The woman's stern expression cracked into a smile. "Hello, little brother. We need to talk." An hour later, Admiral Chen sat in their conference room with 3 of her senior officers. Zara had expected military professionals, but these humans were something else entirely. They moved with predatory grace, and their eyes constantly scanned the room as if assessing threats and escape routes. "The Council of Earth wanted me to brief your wife personally," Admiral Chen said, her attention focused on Zara. "There are some things about humanity that weren't included in the diplomatic packages we sent to your father." "Such as?" Zara asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. "Such as the fact that Earth hasn't been at peace for a single day in the last 300 years, Admiral Chen said bluntly. "We've been fighting for survival since we left our home system." She activated a holographic display that showed a map of human space. What Zara saw made her stomach clench with shock. Instead of the small cluster of peaceful farming worlds described in the intelligence reports, human territory sprawled across dozens of systems. More importantly, every single system showed evidence of military fortification. "When humans first achieved interstellar flight," Admiral Chen continued, "we discovered that the galaxy was not a friendly place. Our first colony ships were attacked by slavers. Our second wave encountered territorial disputes with species that saw us as invaders. Our third expansion ran into hostile alien empires that viewed humans as a useful source of slave labor. The intelligence report said humans were peaceful traders," Zara said weakly. Admiral Chen's laugh was harsh. "We are peaceful traders. We just learned to back up our trade negotiations with overwhelming firepower." David leaned forward. Earth made a decision early on, Zara. We could either become victims or become survivors. We chose survival. Show her the defense grid, one of Admiral Chen's officers suggested. The holographic display shifted to show the system they were currently in. Zara counted at least 40 ships on patrol, automated defense platforms around every planet and major asteroid, and what appeared to be hidden weapon installations throughout the asteroid belt. "This is a minor system," Admiral Chen said casually. "Mostly agricultural with some light industry. Our major military systems are considerably more heavily defended." "How is this possible?" Zara asked. "Our scouts reported peaceful farming communities and basic infrastructure." "Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see," David said gently. "Humanity learned early that appearing harmless was often the best defense. If potential enemies think you're weak, they're more likely to leave you alone. Or to attack you thinking you'll be easy prey," Admiral Chen added with a predatory smile. "That's when the education process begins." Over the next hour, Admiral Chen outlined the true scope of human civilization. They had fought wars against 6 different alien species, defeated a slaving empire that had controlled 3 star systems, and eliminated a pirate confederation that had been terrorizing merchant shipping for decades. "We don't start fights," Admiral Chen emphasized, "but we finish them, and we make sure that anyone who might consider attacking humanity in the future understands exactly what that would cost them." "The Corvin learned that lesson yesterday," David said. "Though they may not realize it yet." Admiral Chen's expression sharpened. "Explain." David gave a brief account of their encounter with the Corvin raiders. When he finished, Admiral Chen was smiling in a way that made Zara very glad the woman was on their side. "Vextor and his clan have been a problem for several months," Admiral Chen said. "They've been raiding shipping in the border regions, including some human vessels. The fact that they attacked an Imperial convoy actually gives us the legal justification we've been waiting for." "Justification for what?" Zara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "To eliminate them," Admiral Chen said simply. "The Corvin base in the Tethys Nebula will be gone within the week, along with any raiders foolish enough to still be there." "You're going to destroy their entire base?" "Completely," Admiral Chen confirmed. "We'll make sure there are no survivors to spread word of human military capabilities, and we'll make it look like the result of an internal power struggle. The other Corvin clans will assume Vextor's people were eliminated by rivals." The casual way she discussed the annihilation of an entire pirate base made Zara realize just how thoroughly she had underestimated humanity. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Admiral Chen's expression became serious. "Because you're going to be governing human territory alongside my brother. You need to understand what you're really dealing with." She activated another display, this one showing population figures and military statistics. The numbers made Zara's head spin. Humanity had a population in the billions spread across dozens of worlds, with military forces that dwarfed most Imperial sectors. "Every human colony world maintains a standing defense force," Admiral Chen explained. "Every civilian ship carries defensive weapons. Every farmer knows how to fight, and every merchant is trained in military tactics. We don't have civilians in the way other species understand the term. We have citizens who happen not to be in active military service at the moment." "How did you hide all of this from Imperial intelligence?" Zara asked. "We didn't hide it," David said. "We just made sure your intelligence services saw what we wanted them to see. A few lightly defended farming worlds, some basic trading posts, minimal military presence. Meanwhile, our real industrial centers and military bases were in systems your scouts never visited. The trade routes we opened to your father's empire," Admiral Chen added, "those go through our least important systems. If the Veltaran Empire decided to invade human space, you'd be attacking empty farms and abandoned mining stations while our real military assets mobilized from positions you don't even know exist." Zara felt like the universe was shifting around her. Everything she thought she knew about the balance of power in this region of space was wrong. "Why agree to the marriage alliance at all?" she asked. "If you're this powerful, why do you need the Empire?" David took her hand gently. "Because despite our military capabilities, we really do prefer peace. The alliance with your father's empire gives us security on our borders and access to trade routes that will benefit both our peoples. War is expensive and destructive. We'd rather have friends than enemies." "But if friendship isn't possible," Admiral Chen said, "we're prepared for the alternative." That evening, Zara stood on the observation deck of their transport, looking out at a human colony world they were approaching. From orbit, it looked peaceful enough. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds, agricultural regions, and small cities scattered across the landscape. David joined her at the window. "It's beautiful," she said. "It is, and if you look carefully, you can see the defense installations built into the mountain ranges." Zara looked more closely and gradually began to pick out signs she had missed before. What she had taken for communications towers were actually sensor arrays. The mining operations in the asteroid belt were positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. Even the civilian ships moving between planets carried weapon pods that were cleverly disguised as cargo containers. "Every human world is a fortress," she realized. "Every human world is a home worth defending," David corrected gently. "We learned early that if you want to keep something, you have to be ready to fight for it." "And me?" Zara asked. "Am I something worth fighting for?" David turned to look at her, and in his dark eyes, she saw something that made her heart race. Not the gentle diplomat she had married, not the trained killer who had fought the Corvan raiders, but something deeper and more intense. "Princess," he said quietly, "if anyone ever threatens you, they'll discover that humans don't just fight for territory or resources. We fight hardest for the people we love." The way he said it, with absolute certainty, made Zara understand something fundamental about her new husband and his people. They weren't just survivors or warriors, they were protectors, willing to do whatever it took to safeguard what mattered to them. Over the following days, as they toured human space and began establishing their joint administration, Zara learned more about the true nature of humanity. She visited shipyards that produced vessels capable of matching Imperial Navy destroyers. She toured research facilities developing weapons technology that was generations ahead of anything in Imperial arsenals. She met farmers who could field strip a plasma rifle in under a minute, and merchants who planned their trade routes with the tactical expertise of military strategists. But most importantly, she came to understand David himself. He was exactly what he had claimed to be, a diplomat trained to strengthen relations between their peoples. The fact that he was also a lethal combatant, a tactical genius, and a man capable of inspiring fierce loyalty in hardened soldiers was simply part of what it meant to be human. On their final night aboard the transport, before they would transfer to their new residence on the human colony world they would govern together, Zara made a decision. "I want to send a message to my father," she told David. "What kind of message?" "The kind that ensures the Empire never makes the mistake of underestimating humanity." David studied her face carefully. "That could complicate our alliance." "On the contrary," Zara said, thinking of Admiral Chen's casual discussion of destroying the Corvan base, "I think it will strengthen it considerably. My father respects strength, and he needs to understand exactly how strong his new allies really are." As she composed the message that would reshape her father's understanding of human capabilities, Zara reflected on the most important lesson she had learned. She had married David thinking he was a harmless diplomat from a minor species. Instead, she had bound herself to a representative of what might be the most formidable military power in this region of space. But more than that, she had found a partner who would protect what they were building together, with the focused intensity that had made humanity masters of survival in a hostile galaxy. When she looked into David's eyes now, she no longer saw mysterious depths. She saw the reflection of a species that had turned survival into an art form. And she understood why that quiet intensity had seemed so compelling from the moment they met. Her alien princess status might have made her important in Imperial space. But here in human territory, she was something far more valuable. She was family. And as Admiral Chen had made clear, humans would do anything to protect their family. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, as Zara watched the stars wheel past their transport, she found it remarkably comforting. After all, the galaxy was a dangerous place. But now she had the deadliest species in local space looking out for her interests. She could definitely live with that arrangement.